Hey friends, it's Gina from the Rebookery channel. Welcome to the series Finding Your Style. In these videos, I'm going to go through my old journals, my old scrapbooks, and see if I can identify when I started to develop my style. A lot of people struggle with finding what it is that makes them different than any other artist, and I'm going to invite you guys along this journey to see if I can figure out what my style is and maybe give you guys some hints, tips, and tricks too. Thanks for joining me. Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome to another episode of Finding Your Style. This is episode 5, and I am so excited about this episode because this is where it is really going to get juicy. This is where we're going to practice. So what I have done is pulled out a ton of my journals. This is back when I used to number my journals. So I think it goes from number 2 all the way up through number 9. In the time period, this was probably about 2010, and I think the last journal was around 2013, 2014. The reason why I'm pulling these out is because I want to show you what my practice looked like. These journals that I pulled out are my practice journals. I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't know that I was practicing. I just knew it as I was journaling. But it was because of these journals. It was because of all of the things I put into these journals, all of the techniques, all of the things I learned from watching other artists, all of the things I learned about myself. It was because of these journals that I've now gotten to the point where I am today. And when I go to journal today, I don't spend a lot of time thinking, what am I going to use? How am I going to arrange this layout? What is it going to be about? What style am I going to use? What font am I going to write in? What stickers will I use? It actually just kind of becomes automatic now, and I believe it is because I spent all that time in these journals practicing. These journals not only show my memory keeping and my daily thoughts and my scrapbooking that was going on during that time period, but if I read between the lines, I can see a progression of my art evolving. And it turned into what my art, my journaling, my scrapbooking is today. As you watch this flip through of my journals, look at the differences between the pages. You can see where I was playing around with different techniques or different styles. For example, I may have a page that's really dark, really heavy, lots and lots of paint and inks, and then 2 or 3 pages later, I may have a lot of white space. This is the type of practice that I'm talking about. Don't think that you're limited to just using one style, one thing, one trick, one technique. Use as many of these different things that you have in your repertoire. Use everything that you see, that you want to try, that you're drawn to, because it's all about the process. And how will you ever learn if you like something, or how will you ever become better at something if you don't try it? So in these journals, they are very different, like the pages and stuff are very different. And then the journals themselves are different. Some journals I was very heavy with painting. Some journals I was very heavy with like image transfer or collage. Some I used magazine pictures. Some I used more of my photos. There were some journals where I did a lot of journaling, or I was trying to do a lot of journaling. So each page was a special little piece, and then each journal became a special little piece. And all of those pieces together collectively helped me become the journaler that I am today. It was all part of this practice that is so, so important in figuring out who you are as an artist. Think of these practice journals as a safe place for you to try out all those things that you're a little intimidated by. For example, this is a very linear spread, but I was okay trying it out. Now, I don't stick with it, but I tried it, and that's the beauty of it. I don't think it's ugly. I don't want to get rid of it. However, I could if I wanted to. But that's the beauty of these practice journals, is just do it for you, for no one else's eyes. That was one of the biggest things I did with this journal, is I made sure that in my mind, when I sat down to do anything in here, I made sure that it was for me. It's not for anybody else. This was not a scrapbook. These weren't for my kids. These weren't for my husband. These weren't to put out there on the internet. These were just my playing, my doodles, my things that were stirring around in my head. And I think that allowed me to have a lot of freedom, and it kept me from being hesitant to put down just anything and everything that was in my brain. So I've had a couple of questions about the photos that I use. People are inquiring about whether or not I'm using the original photos in my art journals. This was a big hang-up I had coming off of scrapbooking, because of course one of the cardinal rules of scrapbooking is you have to have everything acid-free. So I struggled with this at first. But guys, we're in 2017. You can store your pictures on your computer, and then you can print off as many as you want. So I don't have that hang up with using photos anymore. And that has been so awesome to let go of that guilt. Another thing you may notice as you see me flipping through these journals is that there's a lot of pictures of me. This was the first time I allowed myself to put pictures in my journals. And at first it seemed kind of odd, seemed a little weird, but I got used to it. And that helped me get over the whole thing of, well, this is a scrapbook, this is for my children to see or their grandparents to see. No, if I put pictures of me in there, I put those pictures for me to see. And I loved putting those pictures in there because it gave me permission to journal about me, about what I was feeling, what I was thinking, my hopes, my dreams, my plans, my regrets, all that stuff that we have going through our head. And I loved it. I loved, for the first time, putting pictures of me in my journal and starting to really get in touch with me. And that's one of the things now that comes very easy to me when I sit down to journal. It's almost always about me. I've become very, very selfish, and my journals now are almost always about me. Even if it's something that I'm scrapbooking about, or I'm trying to record that my kids did or that I did, it always comes back to me. And that was something that I didn't have when I was doing traditional scrapbooking. I had a very hard time making it very personal. So these journals became a gateway for me to start being very personal and very deliberate with what I wrote, and bringing it back to what I was feeling, what was in my head, what was in my heart. So notice these books are chunky. These were a couple of these like narrower books. These were, I don't think they were the Moleskine journals. They were the knockoff brand of the Moleskine journals. But because my style of journaling, was so chunky, I would find that the books would split, the spines would split. So what I ended up and did after I made several of these and the spines were splitting is I had to take them apart and go back and rebind them. And I used my skills that I learned from my book, L.K. Ledwig's book on bookbinding. And as I was doing that, I was getting better at binding the book. So I was practicing those skills, and I was becoming much, much better at binding books. Now this book, you can kind of tell, has a lot of white space. I tried really hard in this journal to make it all with white space, like make the papers still white in the background. And I even journaled about that. There's several pages in this journal where I wrote about how hard it was to keep those pages clean with the white. But I persevered, and I actually went and made it all the way through this journal with very few painted pages. And I liked that. I liked that experience. It was hard. It was okay because I knew I was learning. I was pushing myself. But I liked how it made me feel. I liked how it gave me a different perspective on journaling. Now, a lot of you guys have asked about, well, how do I learn how to do, I'm a very linear scrapper. How do I learn how to not be so matchy or not be so linear? This is where you learn that. You practice it in these journals. You know, just take a layout and don't line everything up. Turn something sideways, turn something diagonal. Don't use matchy papers. Don't use manufactured scrapbooking papers. Use all vintage papers. This is where you try it. And you don't have to jump in and try everything all at once. It's just, think of it as each page is like, oh, I'm going to try a new technique on this page. Or what if I combined that technique I used last week with this technique? This is where you play around with it. And again, if you go into it thinking, this is for me, this is for nobody else, this is just for me to practice, and if it looks great when I'm done, awesome. If not, no big deal. It was all about the process. Then I think you'll feel like you accomplished something, and I think you'll feel happy with the end result because you will have done something new that you hadn't done before. Oh my goodness, guys. So I have to apologize for this voiceover. It is like battle of the lawnmowers outside. I think every person who owns a blade of grass is out either mowing their lawn or blowing their lawn or weed eating. So I apologize if it sounds like I'm in the middle of a work zone. I kind of feel like I am. Okay, so a few comments that I have gotten on my previous videos and I wanted to address. Somebody asked about how do you work in a journal versus just having a journal. And I love that they brought that up. That is a great point. Having a junk journal, making a junk journal, and working in a junk journal, those are all very, very separate things. Having a junk journal is almost like you're scared to work in that journal. And I've been there before. I've had that feeling like I don't want to mess it up. For me, it wasn't junk journals. For me, it was like those Moleskine journals or a journal that you just go out and buy and it's got the stark white paper. I was petrified. I could never journal in those. I've tried. I have a couple that I've tried and I persevered and worked my way through, but yeah, the blank page scares me, and junk journals can be the same way. My daughter has one of my junk journals, and she told me, she says, "Mom, it's too pretty. I can't journal in it." Well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose. And I told her, I said, "Are you kidding? You have to. It's not so precious that you can't add your own stuff to it." And that's a hard thing to get over. But you just have to think of it this way, guys. It's not the journal that's important. It's what you put in it that's important. You're not going to mess it up. And if you do mess it up, you can just stick another piece of paper on top of it, or you can slap some paint on top of it. I mean, in all the years I have journaled and scrapbooked, there's not been one mistake. And believe me, I have made some doozies. There has not been one mistake that I couldn't go back and fix and turn into something that was much better. So having a junk journal is, just having it sit there, that is a big thing. One of the things that I do whenever I get something that I feel like is too precious and I don't want to mess it up, and It can be some vintage paper, or it can be something I find in an estate sale or a thrift store. One of the things I'll do is I will sit it somewhere prominent so that I see it every single day. So I will put it there and I just kind of let it sit. And it simmers, and I look at it every time I walk in my room, and I look at it every time I go journaling, or I look at it every time I go into my room to do something. And eventually you will get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm over it. I'm ready to use it now. It may be a month later. It may be a week later. It may be a year later. But it's a great way for you to get over that it is too precious to use. So how do I junk journal? How do I take a journal and journal in it, especially when it's a page that already has background illustrations or book text? How do I journal? So this is where this practice comes into play. You will find out as you practice what type of paper you're drawn to. I found out quickly that I was drawn to paper that already had something on it, text or illustrations. So used paper, book paper, paper that has lines on it. That's the type of paper I will journal on. Maybe that doesn't work for you. Maybe you're a person who likes white paper to journal on, or maybe you're a person that likes cardstock, or you like notebook paper. So the more you practice, the more you will feel comfortable and recognize what type of paper you journal on. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll be with journaling too, and it will become very easy for you to get started. Another great question that I read in the comments was, how do I get away from just copying other artists? Well, in my previous video, I encouraged you to find another artist and be inspired by their style and emulate and learn from how they do their process. And that is awesome, and that is definitely a part of learning what your style is. But at some point in my journey, I had to stop looking to other people for inspiration, and I had to start looking within myself. And that was a really hard step, because it was so easy for me to come home and open up my books and look at all my other artists' pages, or get on the internet and find other artists' stuff that they've posted online. And I know that's hard to break that habit, but I had to get to the point where I quit spending all my time looking at what other people were doing and started concentrating on what I was doing. One of my favorite quotes by Teddy Roosevelt is, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And that quote means so much. It means getting out of the, oh my gosh, my stuff doesn't look like hers, or my stuff isn't as good as hers. Getting out of that mindset and just doing your art for the sake of doing art, and not using other people as a comparison, using other people as inspiration, but not as comparison. And that's a huge thing, and it takes a while to get there. I think one of the biggest things for me was that Two Peas in a Bucket was a website that did scrapbooking materials, and they went out of business several years ago, but they had an online gallery. And I spent so much time on that online gallery. I mean, that was my go-to. When I would go and get started creating, I didn't sit down with glue and paper and scissors. I sat down with my computer and I started surfing the gallery. One of the best things for me was when that website actually closed. Because when it closed, I kind of didn't have anywhere to go and look for other people's artwork. And it was a blessing, because I was forced to stop looking at what other people had and start looking at how other people did stuff and start working on my own art. So as hard as that is, I'm going to encourage you to back away from Pinterest, step away from Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is that you go to get your inspiration, and maybe spend more time getting inspiration from yourself. Now, I mean, it's a-okay to go and get inspiration from those websites. Those are wonderful places to have a community of art journalers and to learn from each other. But at some point, you've got to be ready to say, okay, I'm ready to become my own artist, rather than comparing myself or trying to be someone else. And you can do it. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And this kind of leads into another question. Someone asked, how do I get away from being so matchy-matchy? And the first thing I thought is, well, why do you want to get away from being so matchy-matchy? Maybe being matchy-matchy is your thing. Maybe that's what makes your art so beautiful, is that you are able to match things up. And if you never take the time to play in your journals and really dig in and try out all these different techniques and different strategies and different types of journaling and different media and materials, you'll never know if matchy-matchy is your thing, or if being messy is your thing, or being linear is your thing. So while I know it's really hard, at some point you're going to have to jump out of the little nest and fly on your own. And you can do it, guys. If I can do it, oh my gosh, you can definitely do it, because my art skills and my art background is next to nothing. And I feel like I can cut and paste the heck out of some paper, and I feel pretty good about what I do, and I like the end result that I get. So I know you guys can do it too. So try stepping away from the social media and looking at what other people are doing, and try looking inward at your own work for a while. All right, so I'm winding down to the end of my journal flip-throughs here, and I'm hoping that you're a little tired of looking through my journals, and that was kind of my point. My point of me just showing you pages after pages after pages of my journaling was to show you how much practice I actually did. And like I said, this was just from like 2010 to 2014, so this was just about 4 years here. And all the while I was doing this, I was still scrapbooking. I was still doing like my version of Project Life, which, oh my gosh, that's a whole other story there. But my point was, it's going to take practice, and it's going to take a lot of practice. But don't look at it as, oh my gosh, it's going to be forever before I get to the end and I find my style. Think of it as this is a journey, and every single step you take in this journey is one step closer to you finding what your style is. Every single page you do in a journal is one step closer to you finding what your style is. And you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to make beautiful pieces of art, and you're going to surprise yourself. But it's all part of the journey. Guys, thanks for hanging out with me today. I truly enjoyed spending time with you. I hope you have a great rest of the day. If you like this, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment. I'll see you later. Bye.